we are going back to that beautiful history, and it is going to inspire us to greater achievements. Carter G. Woodson, circa 1926.
African Americans in Illinois faced continued discrimination and violence throughout the 19th century. Yet, Illinois' black citizens worked together to create communities in which they could thrive. In Chicago, African Americans carved out their own commercial, social, and political establishments. By 1900, Chicago's South Side boasted more than 30,000 black inhabitants, a city within a city. This growing black metropolis, called Bronzeville, enjoyed an unparalleled period of prosperity. Historian, author, and educator Carter G. Woodson stayed at the Wabash Avenue YMCA during his frequent visits to Chicago. The son of former slaves, Woodson was awarded a master's degree from the University of Chicago and was the second African American to receive a doctorate in history from Harvard University. In 1915, Woodson participated in a national celebration in Washington, D.C., marking the 50th anniversary of the end of slavery. The occasion included exhibits that highlighted the advancements of blacks since the end of the Civil War. Woodson also created a Black History display and was inspired by the large crowds who waited to see the exhibits. Woodson clearly recognized the importance of documenting and teaching Black history. Upon his return to Chicago, he met with other Black leaders and formed the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History. Woodson is known as the father of African American history.
Progress. There's certainly been progress made, but it wasn't right away, though, was it? It wasn't at the, Lincoln issuing the Emancipation Proclamation. That's a step in the right direction. The 13th Amendment being passed, Illinois being the first state to ratify the 13th Amendment, ending slavery, that didn't quite do it, though. We're still working towards that. I mentioned Carter G. Woodson and the Great Migration into Chicago and other urban centers because that equality wasn't quite there yet. Dr. King advocated for freedom and equality because we weren't quite there yet. And that was 100 years after Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation. 100 years after the Civil War, we still weren't quite there yet. And we mentioned, we hit it countless times, the importance of education, that people saw power in the education, in education. Frederick Douglass saw power in education. Who feared education? If you're in the South and you had someone who was advocating for education for all, this was before the Civil War when there was slavery, what group wouldn't want everyone to have an education?
Slave owners.
Slave owners. Because, well, why do you think that would be?
Because if people were educated, they realized that they weren't being given the opportunities that other people had, and that would mean that they would want to advance themselves, and if they could advance themselves, it wouldn't be slaves.
Right. That's great. Yeah, because with education comes power, right? And you just your limits. Someone keeps telling you, well, you're as far as you're going to go. You've reached your limit. You wouldn't know any different unless you were educated. You started reading for yourself what that potential really is.
So how many of you believe that you are limited in what you can do in life? Is there anyone here who believes that you are limited, that there are only so many things that you will be able to do in your life? Okay. And what do you think allows you to think that way?
Yourself. I think you can do anything you put your mind to.
So do you think that perhaps those who came before you, who maybe echoed that same message, things that maybe your parents have said to you, the paths they've taken, the challenges and struggles they've gone through, that might not also be a help rather than a hindrance to you? in not feeling limited? Because I can imagine from some of the people that Tim was speaking about, where there were a lot of limitations. I'm sure there were many people in their path, in their way, who were telling them that they would not achieve any more than where they were, right? But today, no one raised their hand when I said, were you limited? Which could indicate that we have come far, but maybe not far enough. Now it's a question of taking what you believe and truly doing something with it. So what's the next step for you, for each of you? College for you? One of the young men talked about the military. What's the next step? Because if we are building on a legacy, such as the people that Tim has spoken about, then we're talking about moving to the next step and assuring that we don't go backwards. So who's responsible for that, you think?
Yourself.
Your generation. So the real question is, what do you do with that? What do you do with that empowerment that you've been given from those who came before you? And I take it for granted. You think we do that?
Yeah.
Think we take freedom for granted in this country?
You know, we can look up at those flags and we can sit in desks. We can look at old paintings that are around us. We can look at all these symbols. And if we don't dig deeper and connect all of them to the history that they represent, they're really not worth saving. And it's up to all of us to hand these stories on to the next generation. I'm sharing them now, and Tim Townsend is sharing them with you from the National Park Service. But now that you're hearing them, we hope that they provoke you to think about that larger cause in your school, in your home, in the other communities that you're a part of, the way you interact with each other. And maybe they just change you just a little. Maybe they make us a little more kind. Maybe they make us a little more generous. Maybe they make us a little more willing to stick up for what's right when we see it confronted by something that's wrong. And maybe they will help us encourage more people to fight for the equality that keeps us going as a country. So these steps are, I think, a really important place for us to be. We could have put everybody on the top, but we would be being really truthful to the story then. So we decided to put you in the middle so that you could look down there and maybe see the steps of the mentors that came before you. Some of you might imagine Mr. Mike walking up those steps. Or maybe you imagine your grandma and grandpa taking some of those steps. Or maybe a teacher taking some of those steps. And I think they would all be proud to see you where you're at and what you're doing. And then I want you to look up at these steps and imagine the steps that you're going to have to take in the years ahead as you're confronted with things that are going to challenge you and challenge your sense of equality. Because the story's not over. The story is in your hands. And we need you to take care of the story. It's the story of freedom. That's our story. You guys, any questions?
I'm ready to take these steps.
That's good. That's good. We need you to be ready. We sure do.
The struggle of today is not altogether for today. It is for a vast future also.
Abraham Lincoln, 1861.